Okay, so the next realm from the HiTCRiT that I would like to discuss with you is socio-emotional connections, and this means sort of how do we connect with our students, and a lot of times um, this is sort of the be all end all when some people think of culturally responsive teaching. Students have to know you care before they care what you know. And that's true. And that's absolutely true. We need to be caring to our students. We need to respect our students. But there is more to creating real socio-emotional connections with our students in culturally responsive ways. We need to create connections with their excuse me, with their realities, with their cultures, with their communities. So an example, Carol Lee, who's just brilliant. I read everything that I can get my hands on of hers. She wrote her dissertation and then later several articles. There are books about this project that she created where she used signifying. And I don't know if you're familiar with signifying. It's also called playing the dozen sometimes, but it's a form of ritualistic insult that is or I think still is, certainly was common in African American English discourse communities. And kids would do it on the playground. They were amazing at it. And through that practice, kids were using and developing really powerful linguistic skills. They were using metaphor and simile and creating these really powerful ways of putting together words to say things in clever ways. And so Carol Lee brought that into the classroom. So this is kind of a good example of text too. She used what they were doing on the playground as a text to study. But she created this socio-emotional connection to their lives by showing them that this was a very valuable skill. And not only was it valuable in their social lives as a means of social power, but also in teaching literary interpretation. Okay, and so socio-emotional connections can also, and I highly recommend that you think about the language that you use and the language that your students use, and how you welcome that into the classroom. Okay, it's very important that we as teachers recognize that if people are communicating with one another, they're using language in some way. They're using a semiotic system in some way. Language is meant to communicate. So to correct people or treat people as though their language is wrong is offensive, and frankly, it's been disproven. Languages are equal. Linguists who it's been their whole purpose in life to study languages. They say languages are equal. People call them dialects. Linguists lean more toward varieties or varietals because to call one a dialect and one a language puts privilege on one and sort of marginalizes the other. And they argue, and very convincingly, that this is simply not the case. Languages have grammars, languages communicate, and our students have the capacity to do that. They have the capacity to communicate quite well. And so, one way that we talk about supporting socio-emotional connections, partly because Dr. Foster is an educator who was schooled in linguistics herself, um, is to always keep in mind students' language and their language capacities. So um, now institutional knowledge is um, is another is another realm. It's the last realm that we'll talk about, but again, it doesn't matter what order they come in. And this tends to be the place where we get most sort of stifled when we're trying to come up with ideas about culturally responsive teaching and how do we do this. And when I have to teach these books because these are the books that are in the book room, or I have to teach from this textbook because this is the textbook that I have. Um, but the institutional knowledge we find when we really dig into our standards and dig into our goals, the institutional knowledge is based on things that we want students to be able to do, things that we skills that we want students to be able to have, and not necessarily on those particular texts. Okay, when I think back my time teaching 10th grade, I remember I taught Julius Caesar. It's not that I was teaching Julius Caesar so much. I was supposed to be teaching students about about language and about thinking and about rhetoric. There are some beautiful examples of rhetoric in Julius Caesar. So even you'll find that even if some of the texts that you need to study, are that you have, sometimes it just comes down to resources. The institutional knowledge usually goes deeper than that, and if we really focus on making that institutional knowledge um, culturally responsive, we can also think about multiliteracies and what our students are really going to need out in the real world in different lines. It could be, sure, maybe everyone that I teach in my English 101 class is going to go on and try to earn a doctorate in literature or poetry, but it's possible also that some of them may do something else, right? And so thinking about what writing skills they're going to need and what reading skills they're going to need, then that's a way for me to think about my literacy, the literacies of my field, and how they're applicable in particular only to people who want to be linguists or English teachers or writers, and how they're applicable to everyone else as well, because the literacies of my discipline are important, and I can be culturally responsive in a lot of different ways when it comes to thinking about what is it that we want our students to walk away with? What is that institutional knowledge? So that is the last realm of the HIT-CRIT. So to wrap up, again, you're going to read this article, and I hope that you're going to enjoy it and find it. It's pretty brief for an academic article, and I hope you'll find it pretty accessible. But the point of the HIT crit is to highlight the interdependence of all the realms, underscoring how culturally responsive teaching isn't one aspect of instruction, but it should infuse every aspect of instruction, and it should help them sort of come together and coalesce in a way that makes the experiences more effective for our students. Because again, for me, it always comes back to that. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the article, and I look forward to what you have to say about it.